Righty ho. Thanks everyone for joining Pascal and I. Super excited to speak to you today about making AI work. And I do need to reiterate that this session is very much about practicalities of AI, not hype, not hypotheticals, but we're going to talk about actually making it work and some use cases. And Pascal's got his demos already and lined up, so I'm beyond excited about those as well. So I won't take up too much time on intros. Most of you, I think, looking at the list, most of you know who State of Flux is, but we're super excited not only to have this, but also our latest research has come out. So Pascal, do you want to just flick to the next couple of slides? As you can see, we've got Pascal and I. The reason I'm effervescent about this is Pascal was one of the first 2 employees for State of Flux. So it's really cool to have Pascal back again. And we'll talk more about that going forward. But Pascal is an absolute guru in this space. He was with us for a period of time, and then joined SAP Ariba, where he was all over that, and then he was in the design team for IBM Watson. So really at the cutting edge from that. He was a growth leader and senior vice president for Zip, and then CSO for Jagger as well. So huge experience and a wealth of knowledge in this in this area. So I'm going to be learning as well, which is really cool. So welcome, Pascal. Really cool to have you here, and looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Alan.
So as I said, I think from just checking the list on who's attending, most of you know who we are, but we're very much a supplier management specialist. That's our focus. It says 21 years on the slide. In February, we'll be turning 22, so that's making me feel really old. And we very much focus on kind of the supplier management, consulting, training, technology, and research areas. So everything you need to get your supply management going without sounding too much like an advertisement. So please check us out on our website to know more. The key thing you probably want to know right now is, and the next slide will show you, we have over 17 years of global research, and thank you to all those that are attending that have participated in that. The latest book is just out. I would really encourage you, and I know Mark behind the scenes is popping the link up for you on the chat. Please keep an eye on your chat throughout this session, because we are going to be popping links for books, webinars coming up, articles, LinkedIn postings, all those things that will add value to you. So please keep an eye on the chat as we go through. But we've been doing this research for 17 years. Gives us a bit of a unique insight on what's been changing. But before I go into what's been changing, I'd love to get Pascal's thoughts on what he's seen changing, given the cutting edge that he's been at over the last 20 years.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And reminding me that it's almost 22 years and I was one of the first employees. You made me feel a little old too. Thank you for that. But taking a step back from technology, actually going back to the very start when we first started working together those 22 years ago, I remember the projects we were doing together, Alan. They were very much focused on helping organizations look at reassurance of supply, cost optimization, process efficiency, and compliance. And over the years and at the different places I've been before coming back to do this presentation, you hear the themes of risk, sustainability, resilience, and access to innovation with third parties really coming to the forefront over that time period. But something that we've certainly seen, and I will now touch on to technology, is that the complexity of what we are dealing with as a profession and the capacity constraints that we are under mean that we must use technology to help us accelerate and enhance what we do. And the opportunity we now have with AI, which we'll get into in more detail later, provides us these great opportunities to do more higher quality work and reach outcomes at a level that we couldn't have achieved before. So from my perspective, that's the very large macro trends I've seen, and it's great to be here talking about this topic.
Thanks, Pascal. Yeah, I think that's it's going to create an interesting dynamic in the procurement world where not only are we leveraging technology, but it's also going to mean that our behavioral skills need to go up. And I've got a couple of slides on that coming up. And one of the themes that came out in the recent SRM summits that we had around the globe was this theme of trust. So I'll get onto that in a minute. In terms of supplier management and just looking at the maturity there, what's really interesting is only 6% of organizations were in the leadership group for supplier management. And what's also interesting is if you look at the technology pillar, it's one of the lowest in terms of overall maturity for not just for leaders, but probably more so for everyone in general. It's one of the lower ones. So I think there's going to be quite a rush in terms of supply management technology and the need, or people's recognition for the need and that. And I think AI will play a part. Have you got some thoughts on that, Pascal?
Sure. I mean, there are certain areas that are now rapidly evolving, thanks to great work you and others do in the industry to put out the thought leadership and push us to look at these domains. But there are so many supplier relationships and there are so many stakeholders involved that you are dealing with a lot of complexity, and trying to manage that under a traditional system and process, you really come up against those capacity constraints very quickly. So yeah, my thoughts are technology needs to take that next big step. AI is part of the answer, it's not the entire answer, of course. And skills development is crucially important, hence why not just asking a provider to give you a solution, but really understanding what you need as an organization, what your talent will work with best is crucial. So yeah, couldn't agree more, Alan.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I had a slide on actually the technology elements of it. So what's interesting here is sort of 87% of organizations are still using Excel or Microsoft, frankly, email to manage suppliers. So there's still a huge opportunity for people to embrace not just AI, but SRM technology at least. And what we also saw is only 10% of the leaders actually have tools to prioritize value and innovation on that. So yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity to leverage these tools. At the moment, I don't think people are thinking that creative. As you can see, 75% see the main benefit of basically just having all the information in one place to manage the suppliers. But certainly I know in our technology supplier base, we've got automations, and there are AI tools coming through on that. So yeah, again, thoughts on this, Pascal?
Yeah, and these numbers are very representative of some of the other emerging pillars across the procurement, supplier management, and even supply chain. There are technologies that have been around for a long time that have solved certain challenges, and then there are pillars and domains such as these ones, and this is not the only one, where the stats look really similar. So being able to provide the most frictionless path for stakeholders to adopt the policies and processes and make it as intuitive as possible is absolutely crucial to driving the outcomes we need at an enterprise level. So yeah, no, this is very true of this domain, and we see parallels in others.
Cool. So one of the things that also came out of the research is, there's a science here, and I know I'm going to hand it over to you to show some of the audience the science and what we're doing there. But there's also an art and that whole kind of trust of relationships. And I'm not going to run through this. I put a recent LinkedIn post up about that. Mark will put the link on that around these 8 behaviors that we think are going to be crucial. So not only do we want to encourage you to look at the AI tools, but in parallel, we want to encourage you to look at the behaviors that need to go alongside to manage these relationships as well. So please take a look at that LinkedIn post. It runs through those eight behaviors that you want. And then the next slide will link you to an article that we have really about the need for trust in relationships. So you'll see that we see that as quite a key foundation. Now, one of the things that we're certainly grappling with, and I see that AI is going to be quite crucial to that, is how the hell do you measure these things? So clearly, performance is going to be something that we already cover in things like supplier base, but reacting to that performance is things that we can look at. Collaboration, there's a lot more there, and then of course, how do you measure trust, and how do you make sure that that's a strong foundation for these relationships? So again, there's an article. I won't go into it because the exciting stuff is what Pascal's going to show you, but we have popped on the chat a link to the article. Please feel free to read that, and feel free to ask questions on that. So Pascal, I've kind of run through my old school trust piece. I'm really excited to hand it over to you so that you can run through some of yours, and also to run into some demos for people to show them the art of the possible here as
Thanks,
well.
Alan. And whilst you mentioned it's old school, it's so crucial. You mentioned the art, and whilst AI will help us accelerate and enhance the science around supplier relationship management, it's not here to replace the human and the art which the AI cannot do. That's absolutely crucial. I go to so many conferences and speak where people often have the question, is this going to take over this space and remove the human? Actually, I don't believe that at all. Some commentators speak about human in the loop while AI systems run. Actually, when you come to a domain like this, it's not human in the loop, like you're just adding the human to the process. It's human at the core. We're surrounding our talent with the right technologies to help them just perform better and do more. So old school, but so important, I would say. But yeah, as we pivot, Alan, to the topic and some of the examples I'll be showing, I wanted to say I am truly excited about where we are in the profession. You mentioned I was at IBM, so I first started touching the AI topic, building and implementing AI-related technologies back in 2012, when it was not as popular as we see today. It wasn't as scalable, and it was a lot more difficult to do, but we implemented some technologies with some large clients where the business case stacked up for them. But we are now at a point where the barriers to entry have reduced, the technologies have matured to a point where many of us can access it. And the latest surveys I've done when I go to speak and I put a QR code and ask people to respond, we are at a point where about 10% of procurement, supplier relationship, and supply chain professionals have rolled out one use case around AI across their organization, but that's only 1 in 10. The vast majority either piloting or not started. And Alan, we're starting to have some really interesting conversations with some of the state of Flux customers around how they take their first steps into this domain. So an exciting time to get involved. I will also caveat that despite all the progress that we've made in this domain and technology, AI uses probabilities to predict what to do and what to say. So it's not 100% accurate. We need to be careful where we apply AI and surround it with the right deterministic logic and thresholds so that we can identify where we need to step in, correct, or provide it feedback, or simply say, no, there's a human, actually human controls this end to end in this situation. So it's truly important to know when to use AI, when not to use it, and actually when you can box AI with the right logic and controls to govern it properly. And lastly, while you can absolutely buy software from providers to within the procurement, supply relationship management, and supply chain arena, supply-based being a fantastic technology, of course, the barriers to organizations actually putting AI into their workplace themselves, so we call these citizen builders, those barriers are now so much lower than they ever have been before. So I'm starting to see the projects where people are asking, well, our IT department has access to something like Microsoft Azure, which is a great platform. Can we actually just plug into those AI models for a really specific use case that we have? And you absolutely can. And we're helping customers with that too. But with many AI sessions, there's a lot of talk and sometimes not enough showing. So let's actually get to some examples. What you're going to see with the limited time that we have are 3 examples. One's going to start more basic, which is the screen you see now in terms of teeing it up. One's like a quite provocative idea that we did and explored. And the third is a challenge you set me, Alan. You and Denise asked Pascal, I want you to exemplify how you can do an AI extension on supplier base for supplier segmentation. That one's actually a live demo in our test system. The first 2 are screenshots so that we make sure we get through the content quick enough. So, Alan, shall I kick off with the first example?
Please do, yeah.
So this is a situation where, this is the simple one, where a client came up to me and said, we need to clean our data every night and understand what we're buying because we think there's insight there. We're not worried about our largest suppliers and we're not worried about the tail. There's this whole middle section that's just really unclear for us. Have you categorized that spend for us? And when we dug deeper into the requirement and understood, well, why do you need to do that every day? Usually you don't do that every day. We found out they actually were worried about risks that were hidden in their supply chain. And they wanted to be able to proactively go to their suppliers and manage that before that became a real issue. The trouble is they didn't have really good data, surprise, surprise, right? So a lot of organizations I speak to don't start from a really good data foundation. But actually in this use case, we were able to find a pathway. So what they said was, we'll give you 100 invoices that have been through AP. Can you try and identify what these suppliers are doing that are in this middle section and try and highlight any potential third-party risk? And we'll do this as a test to see if this could be scaled across our organization. We'll also have humans in the loop to give machine learning around this. So this was actually an example where humans are in the loop, not at the core, and you'll see why in just a moment. So hopefully you can see my screen. This doesn't look terribly exciting, but we basically started with data like this. It was lines of invoices that were describing what the organization was being charged for. Just so you know, this is not the actual example because we don't expose client data, but we've created an example that mimics it in a slightly adjacent space. And the client was okay with that. So this was a refrigeration system that has some temperature nodes and a connectivity pack, which will become very interesting in a moment. And so the system would go and grab that data. And whilst there was some good coding being done in accounts payable, as we know, data like this doesn't get coded to a detailed category for procurement. You need extra services for that, typically from a third party, or you just have to report based on what you can. We use the AI to try and give us that UNSPSC code as a clue, because that solved the original client requirement that they asked for. They were just curious if it was possible. And we did manage to get not just to the first layer, second layer, third, but quite a good level of granularity with reasonable confidence around each invoice line. So we started understanding what this spend was. But what was really interesting was across the 100 invoices, we surfaced 2 potential risks. And this is where we took a large language model and we actually used the frontier model. We actually used GPT-5. So this isn't ChatGPT, to be clear to the audience. This is the GPT-5 model on Microsoft Azure, because that's what the platform the client likes to use. We could have equally used other platforms and ran the data through that in a private instance. So the data didn't go anywhere else. It was just on their tenant. And what we found was these two risks popped up. And the first one was around this idea from the frontier model that suggested suppliers have deployed sensors that are committed and transmitting on their own network. Is this something that you've agreed? Are you aware of? And then the system actually provide more detail, and this is back in our application. And it basically said, I think you should look at this because there could be an IT or information security consideration here. Now, the actual example was a slightly different one, but it was a connected device that was communicating over the internet. And it was found out that actually IT didn't know about it and the information security checks weren't done because they weren't asking for access to the corporate network. They just had a SIM card doing their own connectivity back to their own servers. You'll see at the bottom of this screen, it's asking for feedback. Did you accept this recommendation or not? This is really important for AI models because for them to get better and to know whether they're surfacing the right insights, you need to be able to give it feedback. So that bottom part of the screen, as simple as it looks, absolutely crucial for AI. And that was the human in the loop interaction. And effectively, that was the first simple example that we did. We used an AI model that tried to interpret these invoice lines and be able to highlight risks based on not very good data. Now, was it perfect? Might we have missed some risks? Probably. If the invoice data was a bit rubbish, a lot less clean, we probably wouldn't have determined what was coming from that. But what we decided with the client was that as we handed this project over to them to scale out, they would feed other information into it, such as contracts, purchase orders, and in fact, even conversations between the buyer and the supplier, the meetings that they would have when they were talking about solutioning their requirements much more upstream in the process. And that would contain enough data to actually to highlight more of the risks and be more accurate around it. I think the other thing I would say is it's computationally heavy to do this. You can't throw it all to AI. You would use a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, and that isn't very sustainable. So there are also rules and decision trees we put up front to be able to very quickly identify through filters which ones are good candidates to ask AI to go and investigate and which ones not to. So I'll stop there, Alan. Did you have any questions before I move on to the next one?
No, not me, but I of course have seen this. But I'd love to get questions from the audience. So, guys, what we'll try and do is answer as many of your questions as we can at the end of the session, or we'll come back to you. So don't feel if we don't have time to get to your question, it's not wasted. We will come back to you and try and respond to it, no matter how big or small it is. So please use the chat to pop questions on there. Thanks, Pascal. Let's
Thanks. Yeah, and hopefully we'll have at least 10 minutes at the end of the session to look through the questions in the chat. Forgive me, while I'm screen sharing, I can't actually see the chat, so I'll carry on unless you interrupt me, Alan, with a critical question. Now, the second scenario, Alan, you've heard me say this, I wish we could do less RFPs and more co-creation in the sourcing process with certain suppliers. Now, RFPs, RFIs, RFQs, etc., they have a place, absolutely. And actually, you're seeing some really interesting AI tools in the market to start providing autonomous sourcing capabilities, which are quite exciting. But then you still have a lot of conversations with suppliers where it's more around co-innovation, co-collaboration, and you need to break out the very rigid structures of an RFP, but we can't because it's a process that provides transparency, comparability, and look, it's something we've been doing for a long time. So the challenge that was posed to me was, how do you retain the policy, the controls, the transparency, use AI, but also have this more unstructured approach to engaging with a couple of suppliers in evaluating the options they can provide to us at a table and still have that transparency and comparability. So I love that challenge. And so what we did is we built an interface that was more, not the most strategic spend, but something more tactical, but complicated. So here you see an example of a marketing event. This was this category was the actual example we used, but the content we're using on this demo, of course, has been changed to protect the client and the data. And so in this example, we're saying we need to do an event. We have a budget of about 100,000 British pounds. Here's the level of audience. So we didn't give very much information. We said this is what we want to achieve. And this was mainly for someone in the business that's in marketing to be able to type this in, but work with procurement, supply management, etc. And on the right-hand side, you're seeing what the AI model came up with. It said, okay, we're going to give you a simple set of sections of things we need to think about if you're going to do this event, which was pretty good as a starting point. But you could easily do this in many AI tools anyway. What became really interesting was as you start having stakeholder interactions, how do you feed those interactions back to the plan? And how do you have the traceability in terms of what changed, why did it change, and who made those suggestions? And so merging a system that could keep track of those changes, but still having the ability to have calls and conversations and using transcripts through AI to adapt your documents and keep track of what the plan is. And so we tested this. There was a number of different suggestions by different stakeholders that came together to talk about this. The person at the core, the human at the core, was able to accept or reject these recommendations or edit them. But what was really interesting is when you actually start having conversations with your potential suppliers, and instead of sending them a very rigid set of questions to understand their capability, we used telephone conversations and transcripts, which you can see on the right. There's the play button, so you could go back and play back what they said. But the transcripts then mapped to the requirements on the left. And AI took a judgment call in terms of to what extent they answered the question, how much detail, and whether the conversation sounded like it met the requirement or not. Now, again, not 100% accurate, but from a business stakeholder perspective, they were actually quite impressed by the idea that they had all this information captured, organized, and they could adjust the scores where they didn't agree with it. Also, the AI model said there were some things you spoke about that wasn't part of our plan, but these could be ideas or co-innovation ideas that don't fit the structure on the left. You should consider these moving forward. And that's at the bottom right. So trying to move away from those rigid structures to be more collaborative with your suppliers to understand how you can co-innovate and really meet a requirement as quickly as possible was a really interesting outcome here. And what I would say is there's a couple of more screens here, but you're able to select the supplier. And yes, you inevitably had to go and send them what you discussed and get their agreement back. But the formal proposal process of agreeing what they would commit to was the time span was significantly shortened, and the suppliers came out saying, actually, I felt like that was a really good exchange with yourselves as a marketing team. So they kind of came away with a much better impression of the whole purchasing process. So a couple of things that we learned briefly. So AI can help you understand your calls. You kind of already see this with Microsoft Teams and Copilot, but actually how to use that data into different systems to help you with your sourcing needs. It wasn't really human in the loop. It was human at the core in this one. The human was always in control, but AI helped them to be more collaborative and accelerate. Quality increased. In some cases, speed did not, and in other cases, it did. So there's a big topic around where AI could help you speed up, but maybe it shouldn't. It just gives you better detail. And that's a whole conversation to have on a separate day. But with the time that we've got left, Alan, I'd love to get to the live demo of our last example.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be questions about that particular scenario, Pascal. I know I have a few, especially around, how did the suppliers find it and that sort of thing, because I know certainly from some of the RFPs that we've had to respond to, a new way is always welcome. So I'd love to get the audience's questions coming through on that. But yeah, let's go to the live demo and show the guys.
Sure, and without having to share the slide, that we can explain the slide. Basically, Alan, you and Denise both said, what can you do with supplier segmentation as an add-on to supplier base? So hopefully I can share my screen here and we can see the system. Did you want to give a brief outline for anyone on the call that's not familiar with supplier base, what it is, Alan, so that they've got context?
Yeah, very quickly, and love to show anyone about it. But it's effectively, we look at life from a supplier account point of view, and I know there's a few clients on the call there, so it very much covers post-deal, looking at supplier as an account. So contract performance, risk, relationship, innovation, sustainability, those sort of things are our core focus. Past, once you've done the deal, how do you manage it? So that's the intent for supplier base, and using it to drive consistency across the organization. So yeah, let's show the team this, and I know we've got a pretty good question from Michelle to get to after this as well. So
I've actually noticed it now that I've come off that screen and I'm going to the other one, and it's a really interesting one about return on investment, but we'll come to that after we do this demo. So thank you, Alan, for that context for anyone that doesn't know supplier base. So the challenge posed to me was, how do we use AI on the supplier segmentation part of it, which can sometimes take quite a bit of work to go through and kind of segment your supply base effectively. So we built this AI extension that's in this test environment, and I'm going to look up one supplier called Sharp Precision Components. By the way, everyone, this doesn't exist, this actual supplier, so we've changed the names, we've used other data. So again, confidentiality. But what we've effectively done is we're able to integrate to different systems to get data that would help us with the segmentation process, but also have the human elements to make a judgment call. So we start with a questionnaire. This will not be unknown to people, that in order to have a science around segmenting a supplier relationship, you probably need to answer a set of questions around the business impact that supplier has, the reputational risk should there be a failure, or the longevity of the relationship. These can all be factors that help you determine the segmentation. What I know from my experience since working at State of Flux in the years since then, but also speaking with a consulting team, every questionnaire can of course be different for every client, which then creates another level of work, right? Because in order to automate this, there isn't a school of thought that says, well, why don't we just upfront map a questionnaire to a set of logic that will give us 100% accuracy? Well, that's tough, because you'd have to do it for every client, and that is just not sustainable. It'd be tremendously expensive to roll out. So what you can do is ask the client to fill out these questionnaires, but you can also have AI recommendations. And this is where AI is really good. Although it's not 100% accurate, it's very good at using probabilities to try and give you an answer where it hasn't been given a rule book. So that's where AI plays really well. And here, for example, it suggests that the relationship has already lasted 11 years. They are classified as a tier 1 strategic partner in different systems, and the roadmap based on your CLM systems already agreed to 2030. So the AI recommendation was a 4, but of course, ultimately the human can decide. And you see the supporting evidence. And I will take a moment to just explain something here. One thing that some AI applications in our space do well, and some don't, is the transparency of why it came to a conclusion. And see, if our systems, and I encourage anyone in the audience to really push any technology provider you talk to expose the evidence as to why a conclusion was drawn. Because with that, you can say, okay, this was not correct, but I can provide feedback to improve the model. If you don't have that evidence in the first place, kind of left in a spot where you're unclear. So it is absolutely possible for anyone providing AI to provide evidence as to why their systems came to a conclusion, and you should absolutely ask for that. So that's step 1. I think this sounds like a little step, but if you think about the number of suppliers an organization has and the amount of segmentation work that has to occur, it gives you a bit of a leap forward. And in some areas, the confidence can be so high and the question have perhaps a smaller impact on overall segmentation, you may want the AI to automate it if it's very confident about an answer. That's step 1. Step 2 is the view the segmentation insights. So once you've collected the surveys and the other inputs, you want to know how that supplier relationship has been scored. So you'll see that for level of spend, 88, etc. And you can go all the way down and click on one. And the other smart thing that's going on in the background is trying to map the questionnaires to a consistent set of supplier relationship management domains. Is quite a mapping task. It can be quite complex. And those questionnaires may be dynamic based on different supplier relationships. So we used AI to provide a suggestion of how to map the questions to the domains, which saved a lot of time. We also have the evidence, the data points, and the integration. Where a customer has the ability to integrate different systems, that would be surfaced here in deriving a score. And lastly, and this is probably a little bit more traditional, it's what's the overview of this supplier relationship? Well, based on the AI inputs, the data integration, all the great data in supply base, and of course the human in the core, we are getting a auto-generated summary of the supplier relationship. Of course, this is a graph that you can get based on all the scoring, get anywhere. But on the bottom left, something that really helps to accelerate the work in supplier relationship management is understanding based on all the data, give me a snapshot of the key strengths and the top opportunities for improvement based on what the system knows. And of course, the human then takes that and decides how to engage and how to do the art of supplier relationship management, which the system doesn't do. So we've got all those capabilities being brought together. The next step, which will be really interesting, is not just at the supplier level, but now that we have the opportunity to reason between all the data across supplier relationships, what are the company level trends that you can drive initiatives around that actually impact a large set of suppliers? And that's what you can do when you aggregate all these insights with AI at a high level. So I recognize I might be running short of time. We definitely want to get to the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and share the presentation again, if I'm able. And then we can get to some of the final.
While you're doing that, and Michelle, thank you very much for the question. We'll start with that one. Guys, I'll encourage others to please put questions on the chat. But Michelle's asking about the general corporate adoption of AI and the return on investment. And interestingly, we looked, I mean, I'll give you the take from the research and certainly what we've seen. It was one of the questions in this year's annual research. And what we found was most organizations are still grappling with the basics. You know, getting contracts sorted, getting a lot of organizations, it's less than 30% of organizations have performance management sorted for their top suppliers. So let alone everyone else, they're not, you know, most people are not even getting their top suppliers performance management sorted. So yes, we kind of get that AI is the shiny bright object. But what we found from the survey is most people are still grappling with the basics. However, what I would say is what I'm seeing is you are able to leapfrog a bit with the AI technology and the use cases that we're seeing. The other bit that I'll add to it before handing to Pascal is I gave we had a roundtable lunch in Houston a couple of months ago, September, where we had CPOs from a lot of the large oil and gas organizations in Houston. And what was interesting was the pushback on AI in terms of the human element needed to train it before it became useful. So that was a really interesting insight on the cost of getting the AI tool up to speed. So those are a couple of insights from me. Pascal, I'll let you come at it from a technology point of view as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And there is a price point that is being put out there for certain work that you can do here, and a commitment that people are being asked for that carries risk. So actually, this is probably a good transition, Alan, to how we're helping customers take bite-sized steps and reduce the risk to stepping into AI, not just supplier based, but if you have an idea, if you have a challenge in your organization and you think AI can help you, well, we have kind of three buckets of ways we can help customers through our AI garage. And I'm going to let you explain the AI garage in a moment, Alan, but effectively, what you could do as step one is that foundational discovery. We can do an AI vision workshop with stakeholders, say, okay, what are your ideas? What have you seen? And what's actually practical. The AI opportunity assessment is actually really popular because it's a structured methodology which doesn't take a long time to do. It's quite a short project where we work with your stakeholders to understand the key pain points in your processes across procurement, supply chain, and supplier management. Identify which ones are most feasible to step into, and an actual next step around, well, how do you prove it in the easiest way? You saw examples 1, 2, and 3. They did not take very long to prove before a commitment was made to say, okay, we clearly see a business case to commit to scaling this out. Which takes me to number 2, actually, because after you've done an AI opportunity analysis or that foundational discovery, we have the capability in our team to actually turn around a proof of concept by using your data, selecting the right technologies that your IT team would agree to use. And I've mentioned 1 or 2 platforms already in this presentation, and actually showing the outcomes it can drive. So in example 1, we took 100 invoices and we built a very rapid proof of concept and prototype. And then lastly, if you feel that it can deliver the business case, it's been proven out, then yeah, it's about transformational enablement, scaling the application build either with us, with yourselves, or finding a third-party provider that may have something off the shelf already, integrating that into your workflow, make sure we're putting the right governance around it. So to the point around ROI, particularly around AI, you don't have to start big. You can start with, okay, let's just get an expert such as myself or someone else to validate my thinking around how AI can be used. Can we do a small proof of concept to prove that it can deliver results? Now we feel confident to go much larger on those use cases. So Alan, did you want to say anything about the AI garage? We really haven't spoken about what the AI garage means. These are the services. So before we show the QR codes, or actually while we have the QR codes up, did you want to quickly say something on that?
Pop the QR. So we've excited to launch an AI garage where we are working with Pascal to launch often proof of concepts and helping people with their AI strategy. And of course, we're drinking our own Kool-Aid and using this in supplier base as well. But Pascal will be leading the new AI garage from that perspective. So, you know, we've popped up a few codes here that you can scan and have a look at what we're doing in terms of supplier base. Please, by all means, have a look at the research, and I know the link's on the chat as well. But also, you know, to talk to Pascal, scan that AI opportunity analysis, and he'd love to talk to you about what you're doing, what's your strategy, and how do you put the human at the center of it, so that it's not just a technology play, but it's actually helping you achieve goals from that. Any final questions? I see we're kind of in the last throes of it. So I want to say a big thank you to all the audience. We will follow up with the links, and a massive thank you to Pascal. We're very excited about working with you going forward in the AI garage.
Thanks Alan. And I've never had someone mention scan to talk to Pascal. That's a first for me, but absolutely, you saw the QR codes. I'm just looking to see if there's any additional questions, Alan, but I can't quite see because of the screen sharing. But if anyone has questions, please pop them in the chat.
Please pop them in the chat. We are out of time, but yeah, feel free to also drop us an email with questions, and we'd love to pick up on that. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thanks.